Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Luca Parma from the University of Bologna, from the Department of Veterinary Medical Sciences. I'm a researcher, and my topics most related to presentation on marine species. And I'm going to present a trial performed with the Medate project in our facility concerning feeding frequencies in Gilthead seabream and with the implication on performance and gut digestive condition and gut health. So just to introduce my study in the Medate project, several reasons were identified related to the stagnation of fish production in the Mediterranean area. Some of these also were related to feed, in particular to the poorly explored interaction between feed formulation and feeding management. In fact, in the last decade, a lot of studies concerning feed formulation have been carried out, reaching relevant advances on the nutritional requirement and on the sustainable feed ingredient, with several experiments provided a gradual reduction of fish meal and fish oil content in favor of inclusion of vegetable ingredient, so increasing also the sustainability of the feed, but also at the same time, the study permit to guarantee optimal performance in terms of growth and also in on animal welfare. On the other side, less attention has been paid to improve feed management especially during the growth phase of the sea bass and sea bream. And this is a key aspect that can for sure increase the economic profitability and the competitiveness of the production sector. Feeding management includes several variables such as feeding rate, feeding time, the choose pellet size, how to distribute the feed, how to use the technique that you can use to deliver the feed, the connection with several breeding conditions, and also the feeding frequencies. Feeding frequencies is actually the frequency in which the feed is provided during the day. So it's the number of feed administration during the day. And depending from the species, the anatomy, the physiology of each species, that can affect, can modulate the gut feed transit, with also consequences on digestion, efficiency, nutrient retention. So optimal feeding frequencies, it is known that can contribute to maximize feed utilization, thus reducing waste and production costs. However, in Gilthead seabream, some studies, more studies have been also carried out on the juvenile larva stage, because this stage incorrect feeding frequencies on those stages can have critical consequences even on survival and growth. And we can say that a few topics, less attention, have been conducted on the on-growing stage on feeding frequencies. In addition, few knowledge are available concerning the interaction between the feeding frequencies and the different feed formulation, especially in light of the new formulation that are commonly present with low, say, with the decreasing level of fish meal and fish oil level. And that's very important to tailor, that can have an effect for tailoring the specific feeding management on this diet for improved conversion yield, thus reducing waste and also minimize cost. The aim of the study was then to evaluate the impact of 3 different feeding frequencies on growth performance, on plasma biochemistry, digestive condition, gut histology in Gilthead seabream at the growing stage, with high and low fish meal and fish oil level. In the experiment, we performed 3 feeding frequencies were studied and assigned to triplicate group of seabream and fed with high and low fish meal and fish oil levels. We choose one daily meal, feeding one time in the morning, two daily meal, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, three daily meal in the morning, midday, and in the afternoon. And we choose the approach of use a fixed daily ration. So the same ratio was supplied at all at the same amount in all the treatment, and that feeding ratio was chosen according to the feeding amount fed at the fed one daily meal that were fed, let's say, closely to satiation, around 90-95% of the satiation level of this group. We decided this approach to be more in line also with the feeding that is used on farming condition and not going to the satiation level that is not usually applied. We use two experimental but let's say practical diets, including two levels, one high and one low of fish meal and fish oil content. The high level of fish was 30% of fish meal and 15% of fish oil. The low level was choose 10% fish meal and 3% fish oil. And the fish meal and the fish oil were in the low level diet was replaced by using vegetable ingredient commonly used in aquafeed for the species, such as soy protein concentrate, wheat gluten, corn gluten, soybean meal, rapeseed meal, and sunflower meal, while fish oil was replaced by rapeseed oil. The trial was carried out at the Laboratory of Aquaculture of the Department of Veterinary Medical Sciences in Cesenatico. And we use 60 seabream per tank allocated in triplicate tanks of 800 liters connected to a RAS system. Use standard environmental condition, temperature around 24 degrees, and optimal and constant values of salinity, pH, oxygen, photoperiod, and light intensity. We triple the weight of the fish during 109 days of trial, starting from 88 gram fish. We measure weight, specific growth rate, feed conversion rate, feed intake, and also protein nutritional indices such as protein efficiency ratio, protein retention, lipid retention, also some biometric parameters, visceral somatic index, hepatosomatic index, fat index. We perform digestibility using the apparent digestibility coefficient methods, including a marker in the diet that was yttrium oxide. Then we also measure plasma biochemistry, gut histology, and digestive enzyme in all the treatment. Going to the result, at the end of the trial, the fish reached triple the weight until 270 grams as final weight. We did not observe a significant effect of feeding frequencies on weight, on specific growth rate, and on FCR. And both diets perform well in line with previous study on this species. We observe, let's say, a slight differences in the diet with some lower level in the low fish meal, fish oil diet, but this level was quite low, within 5% in relative values. And also the comparison between the two diets was not really the focus of this trial, but this trial was, the objective of this trial was to highlight any interaction between feeding frequencies and the two levels of fish meal, fish oil diet. Going to the result of nutritional indices, again, no significant effect of feeding frequencies on protein efficiency ratio and protein and lipid retention were observed in both high and low level of fish meal and fish oil diet. Generally, low fish meal, fish oil diet had a lower efficiency in protein compared to the high fish oil diet. As again, digestibility study, the result, no effect of feeding frequencies on digestibility was observed for both the diet. And that also was quite surprising because this data taken all together indicated that feeding frequencies, let's say, the entire process of digested nutrient uptake was efficient, regardless of the number of the meal in the both diet, and the feeding frequencies did not highlight, did not amplify or reduce the differences observed within the two diets. Also, no significant differences were observed in the result of body composition and biometric indexes. We observe for lipid body composition, protein body composition, as well as for hepatosomatic index, mesenteric fat index, and viscerosomatic index. We had in the mesenteric fat index trend, even if it's not significant, in the high fish meal, fish oil diet, with a tendency in the reduction of perivisceral fat at the increasing of number of feeding time. The results for digestive enzyme activity show a significant effect in the pepsin activity that was decreased from 1 meal per day to 2 and to 3 meal per day. That was reducing. That was in the graph on the left, and measure trypsin also was interesting. That displayed different response to feeding frequency between the two diets, and we can see in the big graph that we had a significant decreasing of trypsin at increasing number of meals only in the low fish meal and fish oil diet, and we just it's quite interesting that in fact the low fish meal fish oil diet can contain a high amount of vegetable ingredients, which can have the presence of residual protease inhibitors, and this data may indicate that consecutive meal could have amplified the potential trypsin inhibitor effect of the vegetable meal-based diet adopted. And this is also highlighted in the graph on the right, where we estimated the total amount of trypsin per day, and we see a clear separation that's in the feeding 3 times a day amplify the differences between the two diets in trypsin activity. No major differences were observed for chymotrypsin on the feeding frequencies, on the 3 feeding frequencies. And while we observe for the ratio of trypsin, chymotrypsin, some differences with the lower ratio of trypsin, chymotrypsin in low fish meal, fish oil diet at feeding 3 times a day. We know that trypsin, chymotrypsin ratio could be a good values of digestive condition. And again, no significant effect of feeding frequency was observed for lipase activities, while amylase displays similar response to feeding frequencies in both diet treatment, with an increasing partner from feeding 1 to 2 meals, and then decreasing again to 3 meals a day. Going to the result of plasma biochemistry, most of the plasma parameters analyzed were not affected by feeding frequencies. In general, they were in optimal values consistent with data on juvenile and on growing seabream under optimal nutritional status. We observe that feeding frequencies had some effect on some parameter and more than diet. And those were glucose and, for example, also cortisol, that show increasing at 2 under the 2 meal per day compared to the other treatment. And also we found an interesting interaction between feeding and feeding frequencies and dieting. The creatinine that was higher only under 1 meal a day and in high fish oil diets. And this could be some physiological implication when 1 per meal per day is provided with high fish oil level. That could be a result of faster protein metabolism under this treatment. That maybe could have been further explored to prevent any possible effect on kidney functionality, for example. And also the sodium and the chloride plasma sodium chloride were affected by feeding frequencies with increased values under high fish meal in both treatment. And this could be related to the different amount of seawater ingested that is necessary for the feed utilization in the stomach. In general, we did not observe in any of the fish examining any effect on gut histology or any change in the histopathological of the lamina propria and the submucosa of the fish examined. Going to the main conclusion, we can say that different feeding frequencies did not had a major effect on overall performance and feed efficiency during the growing or seabream, fed high or low fish meal, fish oil diet. That's the cumulative process of digestion was efficiency regardless the number of the meal in both high and low fish meal, fish oil diet. And in fish fed high vegetable meal based diet, high feeding frequencies could have amplified potential trypsin inhibitor effect. This will be necessary further study on this topic. In general, plasma parameter remain in optimal range of the species with general optimal nutritional and physiological status with all the feeding regimes, and we observe some effect of feeding frequency of sodium or cortisol and creatinine. And the analysis of gut histology also show no significant effect, no significant pathological changes in an anatomical structure of the intestine. We, as a recommendation, this conclusion, we observed that the frequent feeding more than one time a day did not support an increase in feed utilization and fish health during the growing seabream. This could be merit further implication to explore if there can be any effect on the real farming activity in the feeding management, with important implication on the cost of feeding management. So I would like to thank you for the attention.